Chris Mosley, Jay Vieira, Vic Rogers back in this thing with our special guest, X. Wait. Give me some police music. This man used to patrol the streets of Southside Chicago. He's seen it all. He's seen corrupt. He's seen drugs, murder, black people, white people. Keep going. But then he even got hurt on the job.
Damn, like that.
Opposite down.
I like this story.
But keep going.
Okay. I'm with the shots. Throw some rubber bands at me.
And then. He turned into a happy-go-lucky comedian traveling all over the country, having shows all over the Valley and LA. Shout out. Make some noise right now.
Let's go.
Jim Perry!
Knock, knock, it's the police. I thought I was here to serve a warrant. Is that not
Hey,
true?
I'm good.
My name is Barbara.
I ain't never been
Barbara
incarcerated in the United States.
Oh, wait, we got 2 cops in the building. I'm tripping. It's a cop overload. Vic, you used to be a cop too. I forgot.
I was a CO.
You were
Oh,
a police.
really? All
You
right.
were in charge of putting people behind bars.
That's tougher than being a B cop. You got more fights than I did, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yes,
Correction,
it
you
is.
said.
Don't give him any props right
Level
now.
5.
Don't.
Okay.
Level 5,
Where
level
at?
4.
We're not doing this.
Level 5, level 4.
We're not giving.
That's how you met Chris? Is that what you're telling me?
No. We're not giving.
He was like, put me in safe, please. They want my booty. Put me in safe. Sir, go on back there.
We're not giving big.
Nick is a savage
We're not giving
today.
big any props for nothing when it comes to COing. Jim Perry, how you doing today, man?
What's up, man? Thanks for having me. I appreciate you guys. Ironically, I think you guys said it on the air. I got pulled over on the way here. I thought that was kind
So
of
tell us about, walk us through that. How does an ex-cop get pulled over and handle getting?
I was texting on my phone listening to your show to
it's
see
our
if I
fault.
could.
How did they see you?
Yeah.
That's an invasion of your privacy.
I know. That's what I'm saying. F the police. That's what I said. That's what I said.
Did they
used
scroll?
to.
They had to drive by you because you wasn't texting like this, were you?
Well, I was on my phone listening to you guys and then texting something to my wife, and I think she pulled next to me.
Yeah, she had
She
that.
saw me. Yeah.
I told you it was a female. You know why I knew
Yeah, I
he
was
got
like,
off?
how
Because he
you
came in
doing?
here smelling like this cologne. He
Yeah,
came
I
in here
didn't
smelling.
have any cologne or perfume on before, so yeah, no. I'm
How
good,
you
I'm
was
good.
smelling.
Yeah, she pulled up was like, oh.
Do you know why I pulled you?
Do you know
So
why?
did you let her know that you was a police officer? Do you carry something when she says?
We had a professional conversation.
I told you. I told you.
You should have brought her on the show.
I told you. I said you ain't gotta say it, but they said, hey, it's the fluctuation of cops have a cop tone. You get what I'm saying? I know I sound crazy, but you have to believe me.
I gave her some stuff though. She was, on the computer. They have all kinds of distractions.
Right.
And they're talking about me texting on the phone. So I was like, come on.
Come on now.
Yeah.
Come
We
on
had a-
now.
we had a
You're,
nice-
you're computering and driving.
Yeah.
I'm just texting. You gotta do it. You got a whole keyboard that's
playing Candy
required.
Crush or something.
Exactly.
They don't talk about Candy Crush. They
You
just
play
my game.
Clash of Clans.
All right, so walk us through. For those people that don't know you, walk us
Yeah.
through your backstory a little bit. Give us how you go from policing to telling jokes.
Yeah,
Because
right.
usually the two don't coincide.
Well, I am originally from Chicago, Southside Chicago, and
Okay.
I was a police officer about 10 years,
Sheesh.
and got injured. And after my injury, had to kind of rediscover myself, and comedy was always something I wanted to do. So, yeah, it's been a nice transition. I mean, it would be a sin for all the stuff that I saw that the public does to not share that with the public. So, and you can make it funny and meet good people like you. It's been fun.
Like who? Ain't nobody good.
I
with
wasn't
me.
talking to you, Chris. I was talking to him.
I like to pretend.
But yeah, I mean, all the stuff that you see on the job, it's kind of crazy. It's kind
Right.
of crazy.
Yeah.
And then personally, married 2 boys. You've met my kids, and two teenagers both addicted to crappy music and Fortnite. So pray
Hey.
for me on that.
Hey,
one.
look,
my son.
don't disrespect your
That's
kids.
like-
damn
that's like my
it.
son.
Don't disrespect your kids. His sons are so fun to hang around. They cool. They don't talk. They not one of those. Whatever, dad. Yeah. They not one of them kids. Like they extremely well mannered. You know what I'm saying?
Child abuse has been effective.
Snitching boys are full of fish.
So yeah, I met them on the set of. So we met on. It was a casting thing. Well, no, technically we met
No,
at
we
a
met at
competition.
Highside.
We met at a
Yeah.
competition first. That was a funny night. Asia was with me, and we were it was a competition or whatever. And he just walks up. He's like, "Yeah, man." He was doing this.
Like,
I
hi,
was
guy. Hi, guy. How are you?
he was like,
to
yeah,
meet you.
yeah, man, you know, I'm a comedian, I
From
travel
Chicago.
all over the place. I'm in Chicago. So this was I said Chicago. I'm like, oh man, he on some players though. He trying to run some game. You know what I'm saying? He's like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? I got a card. I was like, and I said in my mind, he's gonna go about a car. Here go a car, man. You know, no.
About to sell you a
time.
timeshare or something.
I was like, man, let's call him and see, right? So then he gives me the address to this place. He's like, yo, I want you to come here and audition for this role. I'm like, all right, cool. So as we're driving, we get further and further and further. I was like, where the hell are we?
Get out.
I felt so. I was like, if I swear to God, I'm gonna knock on this door 2 times. He don't answer. Keep the car running. We're coming in, and we out of there. But he answered the door. Hey, I was like, all right, it's the same dude. You know what I'm saying? Walked in. Hey, can I take your shoes off? Oh, hold on, wait a minute. You want me to get naked? It's not going down. It's not going down. But it was great, man. We did sketches for a show called it's called The Cop Comic, where we basically 2 police officers, white and black clearly, going through crazy ass scenarios, which were based off of real things that happened.
Yeah, there are incidents that are obviously exaggerated for comedy,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
based on stuff that really happened. It's kind of got like a Reno 911 super trooper
Okay.
type feel.
Yeah.
Well, I did my thing.
Was your partner
Chris
black?
was great.
It was
yeah,
me,
yeah,
fool.
Yeah, it was him.
No, his real partner. Nobody cares about you. Fake partner.
No, the police department I was on, you work solo. So I didn't actually work in Chicago. I worked on the south side of Chicago, a suburb of Chicago. But Chris is way too funny with his expressions and faces.
You know it.
Yeah, so we had a good time. We got some projects in the works too. which
Yeah,
was fun.
yeah, got some other stuff coming up. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I don't know if we can talk about it right now, but
Yeah,
got some other stuff coming up. But we do got a show coming
yeah,
on
big show.
July the 7th. Plug that real quick. Tell them all of that. And
Yeah, so-
the first show. Go
so-
ahead.
So July 7th at 7 p.m. at Scottsdale Comedy Spot, we're doing a benefit show, and
Okay,
that's
cool.
going to benefit fallen police officers and firefighters. And then Chris will be one of the comics performing at that. And then proud to say that our 7 p.m. show already sold out, and then we just added a 9 p.m. show, and we just got picked up to promote it on ABC and Channel 3. So yeah, pretty
Nice.
excited about that.
Good job, y'all.
A little bit of a bummer though, about a month ago, not to bring the show down, but a little bit of a bummer. My friend that was on the job decided to take his life, so we're gonna do a special collection for him and his family.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So
Talk to us about that. Like, do you? I mean, you know,
Yeah.
do you feel comfortable talking about how you
yeah,
got
I'll
injured
talk about
and
anything.
how'd you get injured, or even people that, let's say, get injured
Yeah.
doing.
My friend that took his own life. I mean, a lot of people assume when police officers are shot, they're shot by other people and killed in the line of duty. But a lot of times, the main thing that kills police officers, if we're talking about guns, is their own gun. You know, taking their own life based on what they saw or stuff like that. I don't know all the details behind him, and I wouldn't feel right sharing that.
Right.
But my point is, you know, with people that decide to do that, I'm one that, you know, I'm a religious person. I'm a Christian. I think that people have some types of hurts, habits, and hang-ups in their life, regardless if we want to admit it or not. I think some people decide to get help with that, and I think some people decide not to. I mean, especially in like, and I don't know if you feel this way, Chris, but especially in like comedy or people that are acting. I mean, you hear about geniuses like Robin Williams. I mean, he was a genius,
Yeah.
but did he take that time to deal with stuff, you know, when he wasn't acting and stuff like that?
Yeah, a lot of times, what I was taught, and when I played football, was to not let the field be the only way you can get your release. you have to
Right.
figure out another way because at any given point, that could be taken away from you.
Yeah.
So I use that same mentality when it comes to comedy. It's like you see people that say, "Oh man, I love the stage and I can just." All right, cool. Hold on. There we go. But yeah, like I feel like you have to you have to figure out other ways to get your release because at some point when all of that is done, you ain't got nothing no more. Like
Right.
Robin Williams is, like you said, a genius and everything, but at the same time, he's still everybody gets old. You get what I'm saying? Everybody, you after a while, the sold out crowds kind of dwindle down a little bit. So now your numbers aren't getting called as much, and that's the only way you had confidence. That's the only way you can get your release. And now you're just stuck with all these feelings. So you got to find out a way to get past that.
Absolutely.
So
Well, with that, with being a police officer or firefighter, and I think with military people, I mean, you see so much stuff.
Mhm.
You know, people don't call you to the house because they're having a good day.
Yeah.
And in the current political environment we're in, I mean, there's a lot of negative publicity about the police, and we can talk about that too. But
Oh yeah, you know we
I
are.
would love to, and I would love to. But my point is like, I'm happy to be a part of something in my own way to collect for fallen police officers, firemen, and disabled veterans. And with comedy, you know what's funny is I'm a newer comic, so I mean a lot of my jokes are kind of on the surface with donut jokes and oink oink jokes. Chris teases me. I'm hoping I get to a point where I can mature in my comedy and talk about some of the really hard stuff that I saw, and then make light of that. But I think that's something when you grow in your craft that you can do.
yeah, that's when you'll fully like look at yourself and say, yeah, I'm a comedian for real. That's
I can
really
say whatever I want to say.
right. That's
Yeah.
all that is you turning those dark moments into light because in
Right.
the end, we all go through it.
Right.
So and then you can touch someone just by saying something that we all go through a negative time.
Right.
And my grandma used to say you always gonna connect with someone through a negative thing you went through more than a positive because not all different levels of good happen to the same people.
True.
But everyone's been through like a heartbreak or a loss of a family member, something like that. So it's like once you're able to speak on that, but shed a little bit of comedic light to it, and you get there. I mean, look.
And we just did that mommy and daddy show at Stir Crazy. What was that? A month ago?
Yeah, that was the
fun
first time I had seen you in like a month or so.
Yeah.
And from the first time I seen you there, I told you that night I was like, dude, like his elevation was crazy. You clearly could tell you taking it seriously. So I was like, cool, great. You just more so
Right.
yourself.
Yeah.
Initially, you was like, I
Very
got
rehearsed.
these jokes that I wrote, and I'm gonna say every joke that I wrote. This is what I wrote, and this is what I'm gonna say. But now you're up there, you're just talking.
Yeah.
And that's the level you want to stay at. So, what happened when you got hurt?
So, this would be more comedic for you. So I got hurt twofold. We got a burglary call at like 2-3 in the morning at an IHOP restaurant, and we're thinking that the guy is like still in the building. The burglary's still in progress.
Right.
And I'm going through the kitchen and I slipped and fell and hit my shoulder. But the irony in all this is I slipped on bacon grease. So the oink oink bacon jokes haven't stopped. Yeah.
Slip, pop.
It was bad. It was bad. And then I went to the doctor and I went to a little rehab and it got a little bit better. And then I volunteered for that taser because when you're on the job with the police department, you have to do certain types of trainings with, and then you have the taser training, pepper spray training, whatever. So the taser training, they were supposed to hold me on both sides of my body to make sure I didn't fall and hit my face. And he didn't mean it, but he didn't allow my arm to move when I got tased. So my shoulder got destroyed. And it just wasn't a good day. And then I didn't get the memo that you're not supposed to eat Taco Bell before that training. So
Took a big
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
booty hole got
Yeah.
damaged too. My booty hole got destroyed.
So a lot of cheesy gordita crunch. That's a crappy joke.
Oh
Lord.
God!
You learn a lot about your.
We need a diaper.
Yeah,
Get the diaper
change needed.
You
You learn a lot about your fellow police officer in those trainings. Guys yelling out for God and their mommy and daddy.
Oh, wow.
It's rough, man. If you ever go to my YouTube, I got a video of me getting tased. That video helped me get my settlement with the police department, so that helped out. So.
Damn.
But yeah, he didn't mean it, but my shoulders. And if you can't jump a fence, you can't be a cop. So I kind of had to re-identify myself.
What? If you can't jump a fence, you can't be a cop?
Yeah, I know you've seen a lot of fat policemen. But if you can't lift your arm a certain way, you can't. At least the department I was in.
Okay, wait. So in the academy, when you can jump a fence?
Right.
During that time.
Well, yeah, in training, you
got.
gotta
But what about later?
I agree with you. Okay,
I'm just wondering.
But yeah, I didn't pass the physicals anymore, so I couldn't. But the guy that was 350 pounds, I guess, could lift his arm to eat that donut out.
Jesus
I was
Christ.
this close to being a cop.
Okay.
Glendale police officer. Went past all the tests and then
Gotcha. Did the warrants
they said,
the way? Or?
no, I was good. Psych tests.
No one asked you, Vic.
They were.
No one asked
They
you,
were
Vic.
saying, hey, just because you've been detained.
Vic, no one asked you.
The money they have for us, they gave to the police officers that was already on.
Oh, okay. Cry me a river, golly.
Gotcha.
You told this story 50 times.
I never told it to him.
That's right. It's new to me.
And he's more entertaining than you.
Chris, everybody come on. Wait. Chris, you say the same joke 15 times. You can
And
tell
it
the
works.
same story. It's a different audience today.
It works.
It's new to me. I
Vic
appreciate
tells
it,
this
Vic.
story to every night. You know, I used to be a
I used to almost be a cop. This close. They gave all the money away.
I know the words to every. I know everything.
You know it. You should.
You told it to 50 people.
I'm glad you listening.
Yeah, Chris was actually mouthing the words as he was
Oh
talking.
my God. Jesus Christ.
He listens. Ladies, Chris listens to you.
All right, so look, it's 7:20. I want to get into the round table discussion while.
Damn, we finished all the other topics?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Well, we got it because we got a safe space to interview him, though.
Oh, that's true.
It ain't all about you and how you used to
Yeah.
almost be a cop. Right.
Right.
Oh, a cop coming? Bet I'm gonna tell him about
Used to be almost. I was so close.
Anybody else got a question for Jim before I get to the round topic?
He'll probably come up later.
I just want to know what shows you got coming up.
Yeah, can I plug a couple things?
Yeah, go ahead,
That cool?
brother.
So we talked about the July 7th show at 7 p.m. at Scottsdale Comedy Spot. I haven't got dates yet, but I'll be at Flappers in Burbank near LA at the end of
Good boy,
July.
pop
And then
Pop it, rock it.
yeah, and then I'll be at Tempe Improv sometime in August in negotiations with those dates right now. So yeah,
Cool.
looking forward
Pop
to it.
and rockin', pew pew, pop and rockin'.
And then whatever shows Chris allows me on.
You got an audition.
You got
I got an audition. And I promise to take off my shoes. Take off my shoes.
All right. In light of Jim being here as cop and everything, my roundtable discussion is, everything that's been going on police wise, all the other jazz, right? So basically, the roundtable discussion is: do you feel as though policemen that are, I guess, a better standing, let's just, for lack of a better word, good cops, do you feel like they are responsible or should be held more responsible for the actions of bad ones?
All right. My phone just went off. I gotta go.
So you'll hear people be like, oh yeah, not all cops are bad, which is true, but it's like, oh well, the ones that, like, let's say Vic, let's say y'all two are cops, let's say Vic dream come true or whatever, and you just know Vic out here doing dirt from the jump.
Well, I'll give you a real example. First off, let me first put this in perspective. I only can talk from my perspective and my experiences.
Okay.
I can tell you that stuff that I see on the news infuriates me too. I can't stand some of the stuff I see. What I can tell you is I've never had a use of force complaint against me. I was in a position where I saw a crooked cop do some stuff, and I just got through about 6 months ago testifying against him. I would challenge your listeners to look him up. Eddie Hicks, him and his crew all are in jail now.
Eddie
They got
Hicks?
indicted. Eddie Hicks.
Tell them that story you told me about. Is that
Eddie-
the
yeah,
same one?
guy.
Okay.
So I was on the job. I was a beat cop at the time, and we get a call of a burglary in progress. I think that's what you're talking about, right?
Mhm.
So we go to the call, and we're thinking it's a real burglary. And we get there, and we find out it's a bunch of police officers serving a search warrant. Long story short, they weren't serving a search warrant. The search warrant was fake, and what they were doing was they were shaking down a drug dealer for their drugs and their money. And it was kind of like Training Day, the movie Training Day type stuff. There's a scene in that movie that's based on this guy. So like 6 months ago, I get
a cop.
Right.
Oh, you a cop.
Yeah. So his crew.
Dang, Eddie Hicks.
Yeah. His crew, there was like 5 or 6 of them. They all went to prison right away, and he fled to Brazil, or we're not sure where he fled. He just got caught for years. And then I get like 6 months ago, the FBI at my house serving a federal subpoena at my house, which is funny because Janelle, my wife, she answers the door, and they're like, "Is Jim Perry here?" My wife answers the door. She's like, "Yeah, he's right here. Come on in. It's about time." I'm like, "What the hell? I've been married 25 years. She let the FBI right in my house." I'm like, "What the hell?"
The loyalty. Jesus Christ.
But my point is when I've seen that stuff, I've always, said something against it. So I only can say what I've done in my experiences. And I ever, 99% of the people that I worked with, and if you were in corrections, I think that you would agree. I'm sorry to get him back on that. 99% of the guys I worked with were good guys. I didn't see the stuff that we see in the news. There was one guy that I worked with, I think I told you this story too, that it seemed like this guy got in a fight every week.
Oh, yeah.
And I would race the calls to get there before him. And then I'm telling you, there could be fights, bullets flying, and I'd be like, everything's fine. I don't need a backup. I'm good. And in the 10 years I did police work, I think I've been in a handful of fights, if that. This guy got in a fight every week. And ironically, he got fired for use of force. But my point is, good cops do need to come forward. But I do think that when we see all this stuff in the media, with all due respect, I think that the media, and I think they all want us to hate each other. I think there's money in that. And I think that on both sides, there's things that are going on. One of my pet peeves is when you see a news story and they show 5-10 seconds of an encounter that was 15-20 minutes long.
True.
I've been involved in those type incidences, and the way the news reports it isn't what happened. And Chris, I think, knows me and knows my heart enough to know I ain't lying about that.
Right.
But then there's people that it is true. So I just think there's a lot of money to be made in all of us hating each other, because God forbid we all get together and get along.
Togetherness.
So I think
unity.
I think there's problems on both sides. And,
what do you think, Vic? Since you
So this dude was, look, we'll get back to X. He was 70 years old
when they finally caught him.
When they finally caught him.
Yeah.
Damn.
He
went on a
50, 55, 50 when he was running that crew.
15, 17 year old. I mean, year.
Almost.
Yeah.
Why would you come
well,
back? He came back thinking they forgot.
He
Oh,
came
y'all
back
still,
if he making more of his money.
Oh, y'all still tripping off that?
So how long was he actually doing this? Because he's 50 years old, still being a cop.
Yeah.
So
Well,
he's making
the
money.
way it all went down is we called his sergeant the next day after we went on that call. We basically told his crew, because we thought it was real in the moment, and we said, listen, if you're going to serve a search warrant, you need to let us know or someone's going to get hurt. So we let our guard down, and we thought the warrant was real, the whole thing. My sergeant calls his sergeant the next day and says, hey, next time you guys are in this area, you need to let us know. And then his sergeant's like, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
And they had no idea. So then what happened is the FBI put a sting on him and did a fake drug dealer with money and drugs, and sure enough, they bid on that and got caught. Why they let him bond out, I'll never understand that. And then he fled.
Right.
So his crew all went, and one of them turned, and then he was, so 15, 20 years later, whenever it was, he went to visit his son in Detroit. And ironically, his son is a cop.
Whoa.
And I think, I don't know this, I'm speaking out of turn for this, but I think maybe his son said something. I think he put his son in a position where he had to say something. But I'm not sure.
They were probably following his son from the moment any time. They made him a cop on purpose, yeah. if your daddy ever.
Them cops said, every little step you take.
We'll be there every little step you make.
We'll be together.
Oh, we gonna throw you in that ball. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And they based the scene off of Training Day off of that.
That scene where they shake down the cop that's in the kitchen or whatever.
Uh-huh.
The rumor is that scene was based on his story. So.
And they flew this dude in. Hey, we need you to come and help us put him away.
You know, the funny part of that is I fly back. I don't know if I told you this. I fly back to testify, and my testimony wasn't that long. I was one of many officers involved. But we go there, and there's news crews everywhere. And I'm like, oh my God, how big is this case? And and they offered us witness protection and the whole thing, and I didn't take it. And my point is I'm like, man, how big is this case? And what it was, I can't remember the guy's name. Is it Art Kelly, the guy that pees on kids or something?
Yeah.
So it was the same.
That will be him. Some of y'all still listen to his music too.
What they call him?
Pedophile music listeners.
He say
What do they call him?
the pipe. He said, is it Art Kelly? The guy
Did I sound way too white when I said
No,
that?
you said it right. Because us black people say the same thing while we
That's
listen
why
to
I
his
was
music
It's
still.
hilarious. It's hilarious that you grew up in Chicago.
So we get to the court case to testify, and what was happening was the same exact time that his case was involved. So all the media was there for him, but I had thought it was for them.
Oh, you thought you?
So I was getting nervous to testify. I was like, oh, what's going on? And then
You
I
was
found
looking
out.
around like, wait a minute, where are cameras come from? Wherever you, whatever I can. Step in the name of love. Step in the name of.
Would you witness protection for you and your whole family? So what that would have you change your names, move you out of?
I have to be really careful what I say about that, but they did offer us that, and we
was that
refused.
serious? It was that case was that serious.
So is your name really Jim Perry? Are you really a comedian?
Are you really? We should have put the black thing over his face. We got technology here.
You don't have me on camera, do you?
No, you're good. Nobody can see you.
Is my voice distorted? You can't see me, can you?
Look, Chris works magic over there on that.
I told them I got offered witness protection. They all look at the door. We locked that door. We locked that door.
Hilarious.
So yeah.
What do y'all think as far as like good cops should hold corrupt ones accountable?
I think it's a whole, it's not a policy, but it's a whole maybe unwritten rule that a lot of cops may have to go by. So if they don't agree with another cop's behavior, because they're all cops, they protect each other. That goes to extreme lengths, I think. And if you dare speak out, you're possibly in danger. Like, you gotta consider a lot of things when that type of question is asked, because you got people who will retaliate against you just because you said something.
Yeah.
Gang.
Yeah,
I think it depends on the level. I mean, I like again can talk about my experience, and when I think when it's like something minor, meaning like, oh, were you speeding to work? They're not going to talk out of school about that.
Right,
but
right.
Where there was a problem in the 70s was a lot of police officers, not a lot, that's not the right thing to say, is there was police officers that would have domestic violence type issues. And they would go to these calls, ignore what they're seeing, and then what had happened was there was a statistic that was rising where these wives were getting killed. And but there was kind of that code of blue silence where they would let it go, or you guys handle it. I mean, it was the culture too in the 70s, not with just police officers, but even domestics in general. And then that has changed so much, at least from what I've seen. If you go to a call like that and it's a police officer doing something like that, or DUI is a big one, those are things that I'm seeing now that are getting enforced and being talked about. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist at the level that you're speaking at. I only can say I never saw that at my level. But I do think that the higher you get up the food chain, God only knows, right? So.
Yeah.
And you were like cop of the year one year or something like that, right?
Yeah,
What year was that?
So I was too friendly. So
I was gonna say you was the
Yeah.
softest cop on the force in 2006.
Four.
Okay.
Yeah. Officer of the Year in 2004. What was funny was, so half my family's in prison. And when I tell you those,
You sure you ain't black?
yeah, well,
I'm standing in the corner.
Well, you're all from Chicago, so it's all good.
yeah, my family would call him. There's certain parts of my family. Love you, Uncle Wayne. But he would call and ask, "Am I wanted? Can you show me where I'm wanted at?"
Am I wanted?
Yeah, and I'd be like, "I can't be looking at a computer like that." I'm typing his name and it starts smoking. I'm like, I don't want to know.
Look me up right now. Tell me what
It's the
states
first
am I
two
safe?
letters. That's the first two letters. Oh,
Where can I get this dope off?
you need to stay home. You need to stay home.
I lost your question. What was your question?
Oh, who, me?
Did someone ask me
yeah.
something? I forgot what it was.
No, I just asked you
forgot.
what year was it that you came
Oh,
out?
officer. That's what I was gonna say. Officer of the Year. So I They used to tell me I was too friendly. And, you know, if you had weed, I was the guy that like threw it away or flushed it.
He was
and
that
it
cop
a big
in
deal.
SWAT.
So they
And
put me.
SWAT when Samuel Jackson pulled up when he was recruiting all the SWAT members.
I was the hostage negotiator.
Yeah, there you go. He's the dude that ain't never had a complaint. You've never had a complaint against you? Nope. No. I believe in customer service. It was like, all right, we ain't picking.
Well, it got to the point where they made me officer friendly, so I had to do like the DARE program for 2 years.
Oh,
Give candy to the kids and say no to drugs.
Kiss little babies.
Yeah, I became like the PR guy for a little bit. I actually, to be quite honest with you, liked it a lot.
I was gonna say.
I did. I liked it a lot.
I would
It
too.
sounds safe.
Exactly. I get to.
My wife was thrilled.
We got an armed robbery. Not my job.
Yeah, my wife's.
Weed.
I just go talk to kids about cocaine.
Listen, you making a difference. You being safe. You
Man,
still getting paid.
It was kids high in their class when I was in school.
I definitely smoked weed.
Not in my class. I made a difference.
I changed lives.
Tell 'em.
I've changed lives.
I can't speak for the overall statistic of DARE, but I made a difference.
Damn.
Dang it.
Damn.
But my
long as you
my
affect the
wife, I
kid.
wanted to say that her dad was a police officer for like 30 years. He got shot. His partner got killed. So when I got that DARE job, my wife was thrilled about that.
I was just
And
about
now
to
that I'm
ask.
doing comedy, she's thrilled too.
I was just about to ask.
I think she's happy I got
how's
her.
it being
To be
married?
quite honest with you.
Being married. And
My wife's a saint. I mean, you met her. My wife's. We've been married 25 years, and
being married and being a police officer.
she's so supportive. But I also think that I got lucky because, again, with her dad being a police officer for so long, I think that she understood the lifestyle and the job and stuff like that. But the divorce rate among police officers, firefighters, military people are a lot higher than the general public. But we've been very blessed. Very blessed.
That's what's up.
That's great.
Yeah, and his wife is very lovely and supportive. She had every show laughing at every joke, no matter what.
Chris told me at the taping that I was I guess a little stressed at our sketch that we did, and I guess I was kind of demanding. You said,
Man,
and she was like, "Yep, okay," and he's like, "Man, how you doing that?"
yeah, she had walked away after. Well, remember we was taping, and you was like, we're still getting to know each other, and you know how I can be sometimes. I'm not trying to overwhelm you with my personality. I just want to, you know what I'm saying?
He's
I
giving
wanna
me
come-
marriage advice.
That's what he was doing.
Swear to God, like I was like, bro, like relax. What? Yeah. Oh, okay. And then somebody, the director came around. He's like, "You guys ready?" "Yeah, man." He's just sitting here giving me advice on my marriage. I was like, "Uh-oh, I ain't getting called back." Overstep my boundaries. But no, it's you know how my gift. I can feel when people are compatible, and you can tell that they genuinely love each other. Like people. Yeah, I've been married 25 years. You know what I'm saying? Like they both say, like we've been married 25 years. Like they're still happy.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right. So if that's still there, then yeah, work this out. So yeah, I'm proud of both of you. I haven't.
She's a
even
good
done
girl.
wrong. Beautiful kids.
Better
like I
person than
said.
me. Better person than me.
Yes. Facts. I agree. Well, we're gonna let Janvier go so she's not late for work. We're gonna be right back. We're gonna take a couple of commercial breaks, plug this Bravo, plug us. When we come back, it's our favorite segment every day.
That I miss every day.
No.
Oh,
Okay.
that's
We'll be right back.
That's what I'm saying.
I hate big.
Oh, yeah. Grinding 101.
Grinding 101 we come back.
I'm
That's
tripping.
hilarious.
You gotta tell me which. Did I
I
mess
should
up?
have to tell you, but now we.
Did I mess up? That's what you get.
It hit him right in
You know
the
what?
head.
I did the Star Wars
Carm, I couldn't ask for better.
Jedi thing on you.
I
That's
meant
what
to
happened.
do that. Y'all didn't understand?
No, I did that.
I meant to do that.
No,
Vic said,
Do it
the
again.
Force.
Right.
professional
Again.
I'm a professional athlete.
That's what that means.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll be right back.
He
I ain't
accidentally
even,
did
blah,
it.
blah, blah, Shmoy to Chicago. One. And we're back.
What up?
Ow. We are back. You're on the grind. Chris Mosley, Big Roger. Special guest, Jim Perry in this job.
What it do?
Ex-cop turned comedian. That hardly ever happens.
Knock knock.
Like, think about it. I mean,
that we don't hear about. I'm pretty sure something's.
I don't think it happens much. I could tell that by the open mics I go to and fellow comics.
definitely a rarity. Now, Janvier had to go to work, so it's just the men, huh? We gonna hold it down with men only.
Oh, about to get real.
So I got a question before we jump into the grinding 101, Jim.
Yeah.
You know, there's something I tell my son all the time, man. You know, as far as when he's driving, you know, my son does carry a weapon, licensed, by the way.
Okay.
Kansas City, and it's real wild out there. You know what I mean? And I'm always telling him, you know, when he gets pulled over, or if anything happens, you know, you roll the windows down, you keep your hands on the steering wheel, you don't make no sudden moves, you comply, even if you feel that you're in the right.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Whether you're in the car, you're outside, you're on your knees, whatever, you keep your hands still. So, talk about that a little bit. What are y'all watching for when we see these, you know, police officers, you know, shoot these unarmed suspects?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what are they thinking during that particular time? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't want to speak on behalf of all police officers, but I'll speak on behalf of myself and my feelings
Okay.
on it. So, when you watch those videos, it's devastating to watch that. But what I think is, I hope people hear my heart in this, is that I think it's important to understand that how police officers are trained. And we're trained, and I don't think that training needs to change, but maybe in some level it does. We're trained to watch your hands, and everything you're doing with your hands, because
Mm-hmm.
the hands is what hurts us. And coming from someone that's married with kids, I want to go home at night. And if an officer is telling you to show your hands or giving you some kind of commands, it's important that you listen to
Mm-hmm.
what they're saying and comply. And I love what you just said. Even if you disagree, even if you don't want to do what they're saying, you need to do that, because it will keep that person more safe. A lot of times, if you agree or not, and you watch these things that happen, a lot of times it's because they were running away, they weren't complying, everyone's jacked up. I can tell you one incident that happened to me. My job wasn't always, you know, giving candy to kids.
Mm-hmm.
I had one guy that he was on the railroad tracks. I jump out of my car, and I asked him if he was okay. And he turns at me real fast, and he's not showing me his hands. And I said, I need to see your hands, I need to see your hands. And he comes running at me.
Is your gun already drawn?
Full sprint. Soon as he started running at me, at that point, I draw my gun. If you tell the general public that, there are some people that will believe, well, why would you draw your gun on him? Because I don't see his hands, and he's running at me in an aggressive way. I don't know what he has.
Mm-hmm.
And then sure enough, about 15 steps away from me, he has a knife, and he shows me the knife, and he's still running at me. And I almost shot him, and I told him, drop the knife, drop the knife, drop the knife, and then finally he drops at the very last second. I mean, literally, my finger was on the trigger, ready to, halfway pulled, and I had to, like, you know, really do everything I could to not shoot him. And long story short, God bless that guy. It was a suicide by cop thing, and then he chickened out. And I'm glad he chickened out, because I would have had to live with that the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't want to kill himself. He wanted a cop to kill him. But my point is, when it comes to the black and white thing, I'm going to tell you, in that moment when he's running at me, I didn't know he was white. I didn't know he was black. I didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
All I care about is this going to hurt me, and I want to go home to my kids.
Yeah.
And I really think that if we could somehow get that across to the public, and again, I'm not trying to say that all police officers are great, and there's plenty that there's a problem, but if we just comply, listen, choose to do what they're saying, agree or disagree, I think that will save some lives right there. And I hope people hear my heart in that. And that's my 2 cents on that subject.
I feel you there, man. I definitely appreciate that. You know, I wish all police officers, majority of them, and I'm hoping they do, have the same mentality as you. You know what I mean? That give that 4 or 5 different commands before the initial,
right,
you know, unloading their weapon on some individual. You know
and then
what I mean?
again, you go back to, with that comment, you go back to those videos where that's what it appears.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that doesn't happen,
Mm-hmm.
but what I'm saying is I think there's times where we're not seeing the full story of that video, because again, I think the media is almost biased in a way to make us look bad and to make us all hate each other because there's money in it.
Do you feel?
But I do think that there's horrible things that happen, and police officers should be, that do those things that are what you're describing, need to go to prison, and training needs to change. And so I'm not minimizing that, but I don't think it's all what we think.
Do you feel body camera footage to come
Yes.
out a lot faster?
Oh, great question, and I didn't know
Yeah.
that was coming. So let me give you my 2 cents on that. I love the body camera thing,
Mhm.
and I do not like when I hear these news media things that are saying that the police officer didn't have his body camera on.
Mhm.
Coming from law enforcement, it's like, okay, well, why? Why did you turn it off? There's no reason for you to have turned it off.
Mhm.
The reason I like the body cam thing, and you're talking to a guy that didn't have any complaints against him, is it helps us because, believe it or not, you get people that allege all kinds of stuff.
Mhm.
And what's nice is it protects the police officer.
Yeah.
And then it also protects that person. So I really do, I'm a big fan of the body camera thing. And I think that a police officer, again, I think they need to have it on all the time.
Yeah.
The ones that don't want to have it on, I would have to ask why. Why don't you want it on?
Mhm.
So
All right, that's pretty much them telling on themselves right there.
Yeah, basically.
yeah, I had a friend actually not too long ago. He had this lady allege all these things, and she didn't realize that the whole encounter was taped. And sure enough, it was, and it protected him from not losing his job. If it was pre-body camera days,
He'd have been done, huh?
he would have probably got fired because he didn't have anything to really stick up for himself. So it's protecting people on both ends, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I feel like the incident you said, like when you were talking about not shooting a guy, I think that speaks to a lot about someone's character and possibly their background too. You know, the fact that you were able to realize, okay, this is a life that I could potentially end.
Yeah.
And I don't want to end it unless I'm for certain that, you know, whatever. Now, a lot of people don't think that way. They just
Yeah, and
think,
I waited
okay,
to the very last second. I mean, I don't think God designed us to take lives. No matter how they say, well, that's your job and you have to do it, you have to do it.
Right.
Mhm.
I can tell you right now, if I did it, I would have had to live with that. But I'm glad that I do think that there's probably
My
people that
question
might
is-
pull that trigger too quick.
My question is for those people that pulled the trigger too quick, it might speak to their background and their mental state. Do you think that, I brought this up before, do you think that policemen need to be, do you think a lot of our focus needs to also go to the mental state of certain police officers when they get hired on or after an incident?
It's another great question.
Even after that, you know what I mean? I think human beings are more so structured to be more dramatic towards what could have happened versus what did. So granted, that was a traumatic experience, but in your mind,
Yeah.
man, he could have. And we sometimes live in that moment where
Mhm.
the hypothetical situations, which might affect the next time. So should there be more of a mental check and mental state when it comes to that?
Again, I don't want to answer for police departments. I'll answer what my opinion is. Now, keep in mind, let's put this in perspective. I got off the job in 2004, so
Okay.
maybe things have changed a lot, and I don't realize that. But when you become a police officer, they do put you through a lot of testing, and psychological testing is a component of that. But I don't think it would be a bad idea to have that psychological testing continue throughout one's career.
Exactly.
And then the worry I have is that if somebody has an incident like that, it's definitely going to mess with your mind a little bit. Or as years progress and life events happen outside the job, that may be changing your mental state in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, at least when I was on the job, it's so taboo to say you're suffering or you're thinking of suicide or you're having any kind of emotional feelings, because if you do that, then they immediately take you off the job. And these guys have bills to pay and they don't want to be taken off the job. But I what you're saying, Chris, is if they did have continual testing, do I think that some of those incidences would be filtered out? I do. I think it would be a good idea. But I don't think you're going to have guys coming out of the
Coming
woodwork
forward,
saying
yeah.
they have problems because they're too afraid they're going to lose their job. And I think there's a lot of jobs like that where it's like, oh, I don't want to say, I'm having a stressful day or I'm
Right.
thinking of taking my life or whatever that is, because they're afraid they'll be looked at differently. And then, they carry guns, for God's sake, so they're going
That's
to
what
take your
I'm
gun
saying.
away.
You have
Right.
the.
Yeah.
To me,
And
it
again,
has
that's
to be,
my opinion, because I'm sure there's some police officers that will disagree.
To me, it has to be one or the other. Either we're going to do that and make sure we check the mental state of you all, or like you said, if y'all not going to come out with it, then we need to give y'all a gun and a different type of, like, this gonna put you down, but it won't kill you. Because I can't give you the power to end lives every day, and you lying to me about where your mental state is at.
One mental state that I think happens to quite a bit is that you get to a point where I used to work midnight shifts.
Mm.
So it got to a point where I'm working midnight shifts. When I'm off and when I have my days off, the only friends I have that work weird schedules are fellow police officers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's absolutely known that when you're hanging around with just police officers and you have no other circle of influences,
Right.
you start to think everybody's bad because that's all you're doing. You're getting called every day to bad things.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed after a certain point in my career that I was starting to think everybody was shoplifting, everybody's doing something they shouldn't do.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point where I had to step away from that. I still had my circle of police friends, but then I had my circle of
Regular.
who I grew up with friends, and then I had my circle of church friends. And that balance in my life, I think, is what kept me more equal than
That makes
some of the
sense.
guys that are all about just,
Engulfed in
every
that world.
weekend they're shooting their gun at the range and they're hanging out with cops and going to the bar and doing everything like that. That's not going to keep you balanced. That's not going to help your mental state.
Mhm.
And then before you got on the job, yeah, you may have been in a better mental state, but are you now? Are you being tested? I don't think that's happening. But that's where I was centered, is that my circle of influence and my friends are spread throughout, from every demographic, from every different.
That makes sense.
And I love comedy because comedy has taken me out of my regular circle too, and I've got to meet so many different types of people, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
We have to understand how different cultures interact, how different people interact, how different lifestyles interact, and if you don't do that, then that's where biases and bad things happen, in my
Makes
opinion.
sense.
In my opinion.
Now, I'm going to give him one. Remember that one idea I had when we was talking about how policemen should